Hey guys, Mike here. So definitely curious to know if you saw what happened today in the market, right? Because if you were just looking at the SPY and QQQ, you didn't get to see anywhere near the whole picture of what was happening today. And so I'm going to show you that because it was pretty fascinating to watch it play out and stuff. And there could be a real reason for this that you want to see. And I've actually racked my brain trying to think of another time we've gone through this, and I just can't. So when we get to it, I'll definitely ask and see if you remember something like this. But there were definitely some news that came out. Because remember, what's reporting Friday? The banks, right? The banks are reporting Friday. And obviously inflation data is taken front and center this week as well. And I'm curious to know what the Fed thought about this, because for the first time, and it feels like forever, we actually had a positive monthly increase in the M2 money supply. And of course, why are we having inflation? Because they pumped so much money into the market, as you can see over there in 2020, right? Where M2 money supply just absolutely skyrocketed. It's been negative the last like 9 months, but it turned positive. So what's that going to mean for inflation? What's it going to mean for the economy? Things of that nature. Definitely want to get their perspective on that one. I'm sure they don't like seeing that, but of course, why is that happening? Because bank deposits are increasing now, things of that nature. And if you look, of course, look at what's going on with big banks and regional banks. I mean, there is a huge difference on the amount of returns here. You got negative 11% so far in 2023 versus negative 25% for the regional banks. And understand, the biggest enemy of regional banks right now isn't the market, it isn't us, it is the largest banks, especially the top 6 banks, because their CEOs have even come out and already said there's going to be more bank failures, and they are chomping at the bit. Don't forget what JP Morgan, the deal they got to acquire that regional bank they got. I mean, it was pennies on the dollar. It's great for them when they get to acquire these banks for pennies on the dollars and take on their assets, because they get such a great deal from the government for doing it, right? And so to me, that's the biggest enemy for these banks, and because they're like vultures, just hovering around them and stuff. You've already heard the Treasury Secretary say the same thing. There's going to be more banks that fail, the regional banks, and then the bigger ones are just going to suck them right up, right? Take all the good stuff, leave us the bad stuff, and be good to go. Okay, that's what happened last time. And so, when you look at what's going on also, overnight reverse repo purchases, what's happening, right? They're going down dramatically. Look at that right there. See ya. Dropping off. What are they doing? Just like we talked about. They're funding the refill of the Treasury General Account for the most part. Okay, that's what's happening right now, as you can see right there. One's going down, one's going up, right? Which is why you don't see this big liquidity drain, okay? And so that's a good thing for the market. But the other thing you got to watch out for, and this is something the Fed President Barr talked about when he's talking about new capital standards for banks with $100 billion or more in assets. And this is going to be another headwind for smaller banks, right? And when you look, for those who have $100 billion or more, you can see this change could affect regional banks, because now what would happen is they would have to count any unrealized available for sale securities losses against their regulatory capital. And guys, before we continue, if you're getting anything out of this, please hit that thumbs up down there. I really appreciate it. And if you like the material here and the videos, think about subscribing. And of course, this is what affected Silicon Valley and some of the others, is the fact they had all those bonds underwater basically, and they didn't have to count them then. But now, if they have to actually count that against their capital, and they're having to hold more capital on hand, that's less capital that's going out the door for lending and things of that nature for them to make money on. That's a problem, and it's going to affect them way more than it does the gigantic banks like JP Morgan, Bank of America, all these banks, right? And so we got to keep that in mind. That's what we got to listen for coming up on Friday, because that could obviously put even a bigger strain on lending standards, right? Because they got to hold more, so less going out. It puts a strain on capital going out in the market for growth and being used for growth and things of that nature. So just keep that in mind to keep it in simplest terms. Now, you might have looked at, like I said, the QQ and the SPY, and you thought, wow, what a weird day. Red, flat, like must not be much going on. Well, let me tell you something. As you can see right here, a big surge at the end put these both positive, but most of them, they were either red or flat the whole day, right? IWM, rotation into small caps. Again, let's get above 189, a close that is, and then we'll start talking even more, okay? But what happened? RSP, the equal weighted ETF for the SPY, QQEW, an equal weighted ETF for the QQQ. Look at it, up 1.79%. It was up almost 2% at one point in time today. The RSP was over 1%, while the SPY was actually red at one time. And so what does that tell you? That means a lot of stocks were green, not red. And when you look what I'm talking about, here's a whole list of stocks. You see if you can spot the red. And a lot of these stocks were up, 1-2%, but then there was a bunch of them up 3, 4, 5, 6% on the day. And some of you definitely were seeing was, short squeezes taking place and everything like that. And it didn't matter whether it was trash stocks, good stocks, didn't matter. They were up. It really didn't matter even what sector it was, to be honest with you. But of course, what happened was to the SPY and the QQQ, look at the big boys. Big boys are red, right? And look at this right here. Here's the Nasdaq 100. Look at all of that green right there, and then watch where the red starts to pop up at. And I told you, a lot of these were up 3, 4, 5, 6%, right? And then you go down here, what drug it down? Simple, the big boys, right? And why is that? Because they account for 55% of the index now. 7 stocks, by the way, 55% of the index. And that's why this plan is going to take place. And they announced today the Nasdaq 100 plans special rebalance to curb dominance of the Magnificent Seven. And you can see the stocks listed right there. And what's going to happen is this is going to be announced this Friday, but it won't take place till the 24th, okay? But it will come out this Friday. And here you can see what I'm talking about. 2 stocks make up 25% of the Nasdaq 100. That would be Apple and Microsoft. Add the other ones in, you're talking about 55%. That is a problem, okay? And they know that's a problem. And again, put in the comments if you remember a special rebalancing taking place at some other time. I can't remember that, but then again, I can't remember when it was like 7 stocks made up 55% of the Nasdaq 100 either. But to me, and this is, again, I want to get your opinion on this. The reason why I think they're doing this all of a sudden is because they're trying to look down the road and they see, one, it's very unhealthy to have that taking place, right? But number 2, a lot of these stocks are ran up so much, and the other stocks, plenty of other stocks are just basing out or they're just down massively, that they know what's the name of the game. It's rotation. It's rotation, 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 okay? And they say, wait a minute, if big money starts rotating, and I'm not saying they're going to sell all the shares of these stocks, but if they start taking profits, more profits, and just rotating those profits in to the other stocks, what's going to happen to the big ones? Well, of course, Apple and them are going to start to have trouble, right? And we'll get to the charts in a second. They're going to start either trading flat across the board or maybe coming down slightly. Well, of course, you see what happens today. They weren't down massively, and they still took the indexes down, right, with them. Even though all those other stocks were green, but because they have no weight to them compared to those, didn't really matter, did it? Okay? And so I think they see, hey, this is probably what's going to happen, and these other stocks are going to start getting rotated into and start to break out, so we need to give them more weight, right, so the QQQ and the SPY can actually move, because those are the 2 most heavily traded, as far as I know, besides Tesla. They are the most heavily traded ETFs, there it is. But of course, Tesla's the most heavily traded stock, individual, that is. But still, they see that, and they want people buying those ETFs, trading those ETFs. And when you got today, it was just terrible price action on those 2. And so when you look at that, they're like, okay, this is a problem. So I think they're trying to get ahead of the game and almost like, in a way, signaling, hey, we think these other stocks are going to start to move, right? Because they've been quietly moving, but you saw it today. You've seen it last week. I mean, I think I did a members video on it like 2 weeks ago or something on June 30th, right? Talking about how you're seeing rotation, and especially in the certain sectors. But that's what happens. Beating down stocks, whether they're garbage or not, money likes to rotate into them because there's more upside than these other 7 stocks, which have moved quite a bit in 2023. Just FYI, and you'll see that in the charts here. So let me know what you think about that. Again, that's just hyperbole or speculation, whatever you want to call it. But you can see, Apple, for example, and I'll show you the weekly on this one, but, it's been in this channel. Again, until it breaks down out of this channel, all this means nothing. Could just get a nice bounce right there. We'll have to see on that. And I mean, you got the 50, not too far below that. But if you look in the weekly, I mean, they've turned this stock into like a meme stock or something. I mean, look at that thing, just straight up. You haven't seen this since 2020. And you just look at that right there. I mean, it's just something you don't normally see, especially in a quote-unquote normal market out of Apple. And so that's just something we got to see again. You saw it in 2020. And so that's where you saw it at. But then you got Microsoft. It's another one. This one actually broke the trend line that it's been in since April right here. Broke it down today. left a gap there, got the 50 below it for some support, got a gap that it left down there below the 50. But again, this is a highly weighted stock, okay? And, it's just one of those stocks that, it does respect its 50. It just ain't hit it in a while. So what would be really healthy is to have a bounce off that 50, move back up, and, we'll get to see what happens. And I'm not sure, I'm trying to figure out how this weighted deal is going to affect it or whatever. But again, this is one of the ones we talked about. The RSI was telling us, hey, moved up a lot, might be heading down with that bearish divergence. And that's what's happening right now and playing out. Now, Tesla did a good thing today. It come down. We talked about this. I think it was either Saturday or Sunday's video. Filled that gap, right? You want to fill the gap. Got a nice bounce. That's a good thing. So we got that done. Again, that 265 held strong. And so dip buyers came to the rescue. Again, they moved down very fast through that volume gap. Like we talked about, if it gets back up in there, it can move fast the other way as well. But where it wants to avoid getting is below 263.40-ish. It gets below that, there's another gap down there, that volume gap right there, so it can move fast through that. So it needs to hold, okay? But dip buyers came in quick. Now AMD, I call this a constructive chart for a reason. It was actually green for the day when all the other big boys were pretty much red. I think it was Meta and AMD with only two. But you can see it's got, let me add the moving averages here. You got that 50 it's sitting on now. That trend line right there, the 110 support level where dip buyers have come in and bought it up and everything. And that trend line, if we scroll back, this thing goes, if I'm not mistaken, it goes back to 2019, where you can see it's had multiple rejections, multiple supports, and so it definitely respects that trend line. Now, does that mean it's going to completely hold forever and ever? Absolutely not. When you look at this, if it obviously breaks the 50, the 110, and that trend line, 102 makes total sense for the next level to look at, because it's going to fall right down into that volume gap right there as well. And so don't be surprised. No, I know quite a few people calling for 102 on this. And if it hits 102, I'll guarantee you dip buyers come flying in there to scoop this thing up. So just keep that in mind as well. Don't be surprised. It depends on how, if these large names continue to stay under pressure. Now, PayPal we talked about yesterday. Obviously, it broke out this triangle. And so now what's above it? That gap, right? The big gap where it dropped on earnings. And if it gets up in there, you can see a nice quick move up. So again, probably 73, 74 would be the next kind of resistance you can see over there. But this is something to watch out for. Maybe we come back, get a retest off that trend line right there, which will make for a nice bounce, but a lot of these stocks you see, and I'm going to be sharing a lot of charts with members tonight about, trend line coming down, rounding bottom, breaking out and stuff. And so, you saw a lot of that today, especially the EVs, that's what you see happening. There's still a lot of stocks on the Russell. Like 25% short interest, things like that. So it don't take long. You saw Fisker today was another one. I honestly don't know anything about that company. I know it's EV, and I know it's heavily shorted, right? And it was up, what, 12, 13% or something today? Again, I don't even know if they sold any cars. It don't even matter, right? It doesn't matter, because you see Rivian short squeezing, Lucid short squeezing, Workhorse short squeezing, Fisker short squeezing, right? And so, another thing, that's what I was going to say on EVs was you got the pack that I showed you guys. They made the 16 car companies in China. Well, that got totally negated because they signed it on a Thursday. Tesla went out and did some kind of deal or something, and all of a sudden they said, well, the pack's negated because of certain reasons. The Chinese government did and said it's over. So don't have to worry about that. They can go back to doing price wars and everything else. And most of the EVs that trade in China or sell in China rallied off that news. I don't really know why, but maybe a price war is good for them. Not really sure. So, that's one thing to keep in mind on that one. But, we'll see. Again, watch these equal weighted ETFs. That's going to show you. Watch, if you like to track new 52-week highs, watch that as well. It's another way to track it, to see if these other stocks are out. I've done a members video. If you're a member, make sure you look in there to sit there and show you how to download a whole list of the Nasdaq 100, the Russell 2000, the Russell 3,000, everything else into TradeView, so you can actually look at the individual stocks, okay, not just the ETF itself, and have a better view and stuff. So anyway, hope you guys got some out of it. Hit that like and subscribe button. Let me know what you think is going to happen the rest of the week here with CPI, with banks and everything else. I always like to get your input, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.